So yeah, I'm Jatin Haraini. I'm gonna be speaking here about take control of your code with Git. That's the topic of this presentation. And so I saw a lot of hands raised when that guy asked like who all are developers. So I saw a lot of hands raised, and yeah, like for the most part, this talk is targeted towards those developers, and more specifically those developers who are not using Git or are just kind of getting into Git but are still not very comfortable with it. So, okay, so among the developers, like how many of you are familiar with Git or have used Git at any point in time? Okay, so not a lot of hands compared to the people who are actually developers. So, okay, so how many of you have a GitHub account? The same people, basically. Okay, so. So you'll learn it. So this talk is perfect for you. Okay, I'm glad you're sitting in the first row. So, okay, so once we're through that, so let's start a little bit about me. I'm Jatin Haraini. I've been a WordPress developer for similar to 3 years now. I kind of started off developing some open source themes and everything, and then I started freelancing. Right now, I'm working as a technology engineer at a startup called Webly. We are based in Ghatkopar. And yeah, so that's about me. I'm talking about taking control of your code with Git. So let's get started. So yeah, so Git is a version control system. So let's get started with the basics. What is version control system? A version control system in technical terms is a system that records changes to a file or set of files over time so that you can recall specific versions later. Kind of boring. So in simple terms, let's say you all have played video games at some point in your life. I hope you have. So let's say you're playing a game, then Git is sort of like a save point where you can just save a game, and then if you die or whatever goes wrong, you can just start from that same point. Okay, so that is the basic idea of version control. So years ago, before like when the internet came on, or even before that, when people started developing software for computers, people did not have a version control system in place. There was no such concept back then. People used to just type in stuff, they just used to deploy it, and it was just done. Like code was just like that, simple. But over time, software became more complex. People started breaking things. I mean, we're humans. We like to experiment. We like to iterate. We like to break things. We don't like to, but we end up doing it anyway. So some people became a little smarter. They started kind of saving the entire code in different folders. So let's say I have a file that works. I'll just save it as, let's say, a file that works. Okay, and then I'll duplicate the same file and then I'll make edits. So that is one of the earliest kinds of version control, you can say. So more, like as there were more files involved, people started making folders. This is a folder that has code as of March 14, 2014. So that'll be called 04032014. Okay, so that is one version of my code. Tomorrow I'll make 05032014 and so on. So yeah, smarter people started doing that, but even that wasn't enough, okay? Whoa, what is wrong? Yeah, but it's just, okay. Cool, so before we go any further, I would like to introduce you to a few complex terms. I'll be revisiting these terms later, but so if you can, just commit this to memory, it's pretty cool. Again, commit, okay. So repository is a place where you save everything. That's just a kind of data storage place. Commit is a state that is saved. Your save file, your saved state is your commit, and checkout is actually going back to that saved state. So moving on, as I said, okay. Yeah, so people started making different folders or just copying their entire code base. That wasn't a very efficient way of going about things because that just cluttered my hard disk. Like I don't want to have 10 different versions of my WordPress theme or my WordPress plugins. That's just stupidity, okay? And I don't even know what were the specific changes that were made. If I'm changing just one file, it does not make sense for me to copy the entire folder again, okay? And even with that, So people just came up with the concept of a local VCS. A local VCS is just a system that manages this entire thing automatically. You just tell that program, okay, save my code. It'll just take care of everything. Then after you make a few changes, you tell it to save it again. And if you tell the program, okay, that give me 2 versions earlier. So that's the checkout thing again. So it'll just give it to you. And it's all stored on your local computer. And these were some of the earliest version control systems. So again, people, like humans are just annoying creatures. Okay, I just find humans really annoying. So yeah, not anyone specific, but in general. And people started complaining again. Every time you have a phone in a year, you say that this phone is slow, I want a better one. And people are just complaining all the time. And so, like, as companies grew, more people wanted to work on the same project. There were a lot of people collaborating on the same projects, teams working on the same thing. So let's say Mr. A and Mr. B want to work on the same project. So Mr. A has the entire version control thing on his computer, and Mr. B wants some of that code. So what does he do? Does he give a flash drive to Mr. A? Please give me your entire code. And then he makes changes to that code and gives it back to A. What if A has already made some changes? Then, like, A does not know what changes specifically he's made. Actually, he knows that, but then B will tell him that I added these 3 lines, and A will say I added these 3 lines. Okay, they'll sit, and kind of redundant, I would say. So then people came out with the concept of a central version control system. Central VCS is kind of like a server that will hold your entire history, all your commits and everything. And basically, whenever you want a version, you just tell the server, give me version 2, give me version 1, and that server will give you that specific version. Same with B, and whenever you're done changing stuff, you just put it back on the server, and server will manage all the changes, like these changes were made by A, these changes were made by B, the combination should look like this. That is the concept of central VCS. And so people had problems with central VCS again. And what the problems were? Kind of the same problems that we faced some time ago. So if you're not connected to the internet, what do you do? I want version 2, but I'm not connected to the internet. What do I do? Okay, so it's just completely disrupting your workflow, getting disconnected from the server. Also, if the server goes down for some reason, the data gets corrupted or anything, everything is lost. All the hours that you put into the project is just lost. So again, people put their minds together. They came up with the concept of distributed VCS. So what this exactly is, that the entire, so whenever A asks for a particular version, if he's connected to the server, he will get that version as well as all the other versions that are ever there. So if A is asking for a version 2, he'll still get version 1, version 2, version 3, and the entire VCS will be copied onto his system. So even if there's no connectivity, so he can still get version 1, version 2, version 3 locally. And similarly, if the server goes down, we still have the entire VCS. We can just get a new server and put it back. So that's the concept of distributed version control system. With all the boring things out of the way, let's get to what Git actually is. Git is the stupid content tracker. Now, okay, so why the stupid content tracker? It's not something I made up. Like, I just did not Google it yesterday or whatever. Is actually, like, if you check Git, like, if people have, okay, how many people here are familiar with using a command line interface? Whoa, quite a lot of people. Okay, so basically you just like open start, enter run, and then you enter cmd. Basically just enter git man, and this is what you will get. So the description official description for Git is the stupid content tracker. That's the official word on it. Why Git? The nation wants to know. Okay, so basically, yeah, so what happened is yesterday I was sitting with a friend, Aditya. He's a pretty smart guy. He knows a lot of things. So I was pretty sure this guy knows his stuff. So I'll just sit with him and kind of go through my slides once. So we reached this part where it says why Git. And I could not have picked the worst person to practice this thing with. So this guy is a big Arnab Goswami fan. He's like, Jatin, why Git? The nation wants to know. So I went, all kind of, like, I went all cliche on him. I was like, Aditya, to know why Git, you should first know where Git comes from. You should know why Git and how Git became the Git that it is today. What were the events that transpired to make Git the Git it is today? Okay, so back in the early part of last decade, so Linus Torvalds and his bunch of geeks, they were just sitting coding on a VCS called BitKeeper. Okay, and they were working on the Linux kernel. BitKeeper was friends with this guy. They allowed them, the Linux guys, to use the BitKeeper software for free. But soon enough, there was some conflict of interest. They had an argument and stuff, and BitKeeper guys were like, no, you cannot use BitKeeper anymore. Okay, so unfortunately, BitKeeper wasn't open source or anything. So Linus was really angry. He was really angry, and knowing this guy, he's a really smart guy. He's like the real man, a real life Iron Man or something. Okay, so he just said, you know what, just forget BitKeeper, I'll just make my own thing. So he took all the elements that he liked about BitKeeper, it's distributed, it's all, and he made his own thing. He called it Git. And so why the name Git? Okay, a small nugget of information. Git actually, like when Linus was asked in an interview, he said that Git is British slang for a very annoying person, a very annoying, unpleasant person. And that's how Git gets his name, because Linus always liked to name everything on on himself. So even Linux, the open source operating system, and Git is again based on Linux own name. So why Git? The answer is Git makes you harder, better, faster, and stronger. Well, not in a physical sense, but as a coder, you become a better coder, you become a faster coder, and you become a more efficient coder who does not end up losing his own code, who does not go to the boss saying कि अरे ये कल किया था, but ये copy करने में delete हो गया, or something like that. No such excuses are valid anymore, because the boss can just see what you have done. Okay, this is going to take some time. So yeah, what makes Git better than any other version control system? So version control system is a very broad term, but what makes Git better than the rest? Okay, so a few things that Git has listed on its own websites is branching and merging is a good thing. So branching is, so Git has a default track, like if you go linearly, there's a master branch. And let's say your program is just working. You reach a point where, you know, like, yeah, my theme is ready. I launch version 1.2 or whatever. What did I do? Yeah. And then your boss just comes in, okay, I want to like make the logo bigger. The client comes in, make the logo bigger, the classic problem of designers. And you're like, that's not gonna work. That's just not gonna work. The client is like, make the logo bigger, but don't put it on the live side, just show me first. And then we'll work out what goes. So you just make a new branch. I'll just come back to branching in a future slide. For now, just remember that it's something like you just make a new branch to put in some experimental stuff. And if you're happy with it, you just put it back into your main code base. And until you do that, your main code base is completely safe and you do not end up pushing or deploying any code that you do not want to. So you can just put that thing in the make the logo bigger branch. And yeah? Like we make demo. Sort of like that, but yeah, sort of like that. And if it's just valid, then you put it back into the main code base. So this is actually a more efficient way of doing it. I'll just come to that more on branching later. So, and you just show it to the client, you know, this is how bad your website will look with a bigger logo. And client, being the classic annoying client, will always tell you, yes, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I want. And you're like, no, this will make it look so bad. But since the client wants it, you have to do it anyway. So if the client validates the entire thing, you put it back into the main code base. And then you just deploy the whole thing. So yeah, you're stuck with a very stupid looking logo. So moving on, Git is small and fast. I really do not think I need to explain more on these two words. It's just straightforward. It takes up very little space and it's really fast. Like you can get a version in a matter of milliseconds. If you're like working on WordPress or something. And Git is distributed, again, as talked, like I explained a few slides ago. Git is a type of distributed version control system, and it has all the advantages that I talked about before. Git has data assurance, so kind of getting a little geeky over here. So Git makes sure that the output that you get is always the things that you put in. So how Git does is it just has a hash that it stores, it has a corresponding hash that it stores with the commits that you make, and whenever you're getting back the data, you just get the exact same data because of that hash. So in simple terms, you just get what you put in, okay? So if there's any corruption, Git will tell you that this is corruption, but it won't give you wrong output. So, and corruption very rarely happens, like I haven't heard of a thing. Staging area is again something that I'll talk about in a few slides, but staging area is basically you tell Git that, you know, these are the files that I want to save. And what is wrong? What happened? The laptop just shut down.
So why is the presentation? It will come, it will come.
What is happening? Huh, because okay, I'm good. So yeah, wait, I completely forgot where I was. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so I was on staging area, I suppose. Yeah, so you tell Git that, you know, these are the files that I want to save. Git puts it in a staging area and asks you, are you sure? And you can just revise it once, check if it's the right thing, and then you just commit it. So yeah, in simple terms, that's what it is. More on that later. And obviously, Git is free and open source. Thank you for the great introduction to GPL and the advantages of open source. So that's about it. So as Linus once ran into a problem with BitKeeper, who would not allow Linus to use his software. Similarly, like right now, you can just use Git and never ever be concerned that someday, tomorrow, someone might come up to you and say, you know, you can't use Git anymore without paying me some money. That's never going to happen. Okay, so finally. So yeah, so let's get started with this thing. Installing Git is a fairly simple process. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have installed some sort of software on Windows. It's fairly straightforward. You just go download a exe file. You just do next, 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 next. Okay, that's it. So that's why I haven't added anything over here. And yeah, don't worry, there's no malicious software that's going to be installed, no toolbars, no nothing. You don't have to worry about anything. So yeah, just make sure that in this slide, adjusting your path environment, the second option is set up, because it's actually something that I recommend, but it's not really necessary. So you can, using this software, you will be able to run Git from your regular command prompt that Windows ships with. Okay, so that's the only advantage, and make sure you have this option selected. Moving on. And installing Git on Linux. So Linux users are just too cool, man. We don't do all those next things. We just type one line and we're done. Arrogant Linux people. Sudo apt get install Git. Simplest of things. Okay, and of course you'll need your sudo password and everything. So Linux users can actually do this. I don't even think I need to elaborate on that. So yeah, first thing that you do after installing Git is configuring Git. So Git does not know who you are. Git has always wondered, so now I'm on this computer, but whose computer is this? Who's using me? So Git wants to know you better. For that, you tell Git your name and your email. These are the commands. These are just two simple commands to configure your Git, and you're done, and the installation is complete. Okay, so it's git config global username, git config global user dot email. Of course, like you run these commands in your git bash if you're on Windows, and okay, git bash is another terminal that comes with Git. So you'll just get a Git program called git bash. I'll just show you a demo on git bash later, but these are the two commands that you run in a terminal or git bash once you have Git installed. So kind of getting a little in the geekier side of things, you just kind of try to follow along, and the demo will probably help you with all these things. So let's get rolling. You go into a folder. Now I have my code. I have Git installed. How do I use it? Simple. You do a Git init, you do a Git add dot, you do a Git commit and first commit. Like these 3 lines of code are the minimum requirement that you should know to use Git. If you know these 3 lines, you can use Git. Okay, you can officially use Git. And so yeah, a lot of people are like, what? He just ran through the 3 lines without even explaining what that is. So these are the 3 lines that I was talking about. Git init initializes a new repository in your current directory. It will tell the Git software, dude, I want a new repository in this thing. Are you going to do it? Git will say, yes, I'll do it for you. And then it just makes a blank database kind of thing. And then you do a git add to tell Git that, I want these files. As seen before, git add dot will add all the current files in your directory to Git, and Git commit actually makes a save point. As mentioned earlier, the purpose of VCS is to save all your data, and Git commit does all the dirty work for you. So a bit on staging, and a couple more slides before we jump into a quick demo. Staging is, as explained earlier, staging is a place where you tell Git, these are the files I want to commit. But Git just asks you, are you sure? And the staging area is where the sure files are. And then you just ask Git to commit. It's just a kind of 2-step process to make sure everything that you've done is right. Another slide before we jump into a demo. Quick commands, git status tells you the current status, git log. You don't really have to remember all of these because these slides are going to be up anyway. And there's a big documentation that I'm going to tell you about. And there you can just check all these commands. So git log will tell you the history, and git checkout will actually give you an older version of your code. So a lot of technical terms, a lot of people just wondering what did he just say. So let's jump into a quick demo. So what you're seeing on screen right now is a Git bash terminal. Yeah, no, it's not working. Oh, sorry. The charger is not working. Just a minute, please. Yeah. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, so we're back, and so this is a repository, like this is a folder I have over here. So this is the folder that I'm going to get into. This is a small theme that I just started making. It's called WP Camp theme, okay? And this is the same folder open in my terminal. So people who are just scared of the command line, just don't worry. I'll show you easier methods to use Git later. Okay, so you just do a git status. So, and notice that it doesn't work because we don't have a Git repository initialized yet. Git init, initialized empty Git repository, which completely validates at least one line of the code that I gave you. And git status, nothing is in the staging area, untracked files, style.css. So moving forward, git add dot. So yeah, the git add command actually added the style.css as a change to be committed, okay? So now git So added a first file, git status shows you that all the changes are committed. There's no code in your folder that is not being tracked by git. Okay, so git log will show you a history of your git commits. You can see that it says first file added was the commit I just made. It shows you my author name, which is Jatin, my email, and a date and a timestamp completely when I made the commits. Okay, so let's, you know what, like I'll just use Sublime text over here. So this is my style.css file. I'll just make a new file over here, call it index.php. And yeah, that's just it. I'll add a, so yeah, that's a file that I just created. In the command line you'll see that, okay, wrong command line. Yeah, so the index.php file is here, git status, and index.file is not tracked, git add. So this command, if you haven't seen before, is git add and then followed by a file name. So if there's any commit that you want, and you want to just commit a couple of files into it and not the entire folder, so this is what you use git add and then a single file by B. So again, git So sorry if I went too fast over there. So these are the two commits that I just made, and the only commands that I used to make these was git init, git add, and git commit. So those three are the most basic commands I would say in using git, and these are the two versions that I have. Okay, so moving on, getting back to the slide. What time does the presentation end? Okay, cool. So yeah, moving on. So this was our last slide. A git ignore file. So you just make a new file, call it .git ignore without, like .git ignore is the extension itself, and you just put in 4 lines of code. Okay, and these 4 are not the actual lines that you put in. Sorry. You can put in any files that you do not want in Git. Let's say you have a git config.php. Now, if you put this up on GitHub, someone is just gonna peek into it and, oh, this is Jatin's database username and password, and probably hack into your website or something. So you definitely don't want that on GitHub. Again, htaccess, some servers have their own way of managing htaccess. You don't want that. You don't want the uploads folder. You just don't want 2 GB of images, all your YouTube videos, everything on the Git thing. So also cache things, again, you do not want those folders as well. So these are just examples of stuff that you can add to the git ignore file, and Git will completely ignore this. The git ignore file is a file that you make in your root directory, which was wp-camp_theme in my case. What is wrong? Okay, so yeah, more on branching as mentioned earlier. So let's say we are on a branch that is called develop. Again, so this is a working instance of the code. Then later your boss says make the logo bigger. This is a branch that you try to make the logo bigger. Here your client or whatever boss says that it's okay, and you just put it back into the main code base. So how your main code base looks later is like this. Once you have done it, your main branch develop does not even need to know that there was another branch called feature. It's just linear. It'll just know that these commits were made, and this is how the entire output should be. What is wrong? Okay. So yeah. So these are the commands that you use to make a branch. I'm really sorry about the slides. Git branch, branch name will create a branch. Git checkout, branch will check out that branch, will just actually make your current state the first state of that branch. And git merge branch is the last stage, which actually brings your branch 1 into your master branch. So I'll just do a quick demo before I move on. This won't take as long. Yeah, so git status, okay, it's clean. So git branch bigger logo and git. So we have a branch called bigger logo. Over here, if you see in the bracket, you can actually read that Git is telling you that you're on the master branch right now in all your folder paths. So let's change that. Git checkout bigger logo. And now you're on a branch called bigger logo. Okay, and let's clear this. So that's it. So again, let's make a commit. Git. No, let's make a file first. Touch. So basically, just created a file called logo.php. You can do it by the conventional method that I followed for index.php, and clear. So yeah, same process. Git add dot. Okay, so on branch bigger logo, nothing to commit, and git log. So as you can see that when we made a branch called bigger logo, we actually took the code that was in the master branch as well. Now I go back to my master branch, and as mentioned earlier, git merge. And that's it. And now, since you notice that we are on the master branch, if I do a git status and a git log, you can see that the bigger logo is again coming back into the master branch. So that kind of wraps up the branching model. And also, so yeah, let's get back to our presentation. So with all the code demos out of the way, let's get back to what we were discussing. What is GitHub? Now a lot of people over here have heard about GitHub. I'm sure everyone has. It's all the rage now these days. Everyone you talk to wants to be on GitHub. So yeah, kind of annoying. So yeah, GitHub is a web, like in technical terms again, GitHub is a web-based hosting service for software development projects, blah, 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 blah. You can read through that. Basically in 2008, these people, Tom, Preston, Werner, Chris, just Chris, and PJ, okay, these three guys came up with an idea, okay, let's make a website that'll act as a remote server for all the Git repositories there are. Okay, so they made GitHub, and now it's free. You can just go and make an account, and you can use GitHub as your remote host. You don't need your own server. How do you do that? You sign up for a GitHub account. It's free. Rejoice. And yeah, you just go and you provide them with your details, your username, password, email, all that stuff. You get a confirmation email, your regular thing. You have all signed up for Facebook. You know the process. So moving on, and step 2, this is optional for the more techie guys. Just try Googling this. I have provided a link. You'll get the presentation later. Just go to this link and follow this. So what this will do is, whenever you try to put your code up on GitHub, this will allow you to just not enter your password every time. That's basically what this does. In more technical terms, it adds an SSH verification key to the server and your local thing. So basically just tech stuff. You just don't have to enter a password every time, which can get annoying, trust me. Working with remotes. Again, a remote repository is your GitHub. In our case, it's GitHub. It can be anything. The steps for that, more code, yes. Git remote, add origin, your repository. So your repository part is something that you get off GitHub, adds a remote repository to your local repository. Wow, lot of sense that made. Pushing to GitHub more bits of code, 2 commands, push all your code to GitHub and push all origins. So like a lot of people were like, wow, so much code. How am I ever gonna remember this? So you don't have to, okay? So I'll show you in the following demo how you can just do that. Okay, the internet is down. Again. It's connected. Let me try number 1.
Can you wrap this up quickly? We are out of time. Even though we started late, we still have time.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. I'm not getting any internet, so I guess I'll have to skip this part. So basically on GitHub, if you see, I'll have to actually wrap this up quickly. And since we don't have internet, I'll skip the demo for this. But basically you see a link for a new repository. That's me signed in. And you just click on that, it'll ask you to enter a name for your project, and that's about it. It'll also give you a bunch of code. That bunch of code is actually, so yeah, this bunch of code that it'll give you will be this. What is wrong? Yeah, so it's this. So these lines of command GitHub will give you, and you just copy paste that. It's simple as that. Cloning from GitHub, cloning is again just asking GitHub, give me your code, give me your open source code. You want WordPress from GitHub, you tell Git clone the link that Git will give you, like the URL for your WordPress on Git. And if any changes are made after that, you just go for Git pull. Forking existing projects, you like WordPress on GitHub, you like WordPress, you like some theme on GitHub. And as with GPL, you can use that, you can modify that to your own needs, and that's what you use forking for. You just copy paste that into your own, copy that entire thing in your own account, you make changes, and then you claim credit for it. GitHub and open source. GitHub supports GPL, which is a big thing. You can just put all your open source projects on GPL or GitHub. And that's one of the most important reasons GitHub is so popular today. WordPress is on GitHub. So github.com/WordPress/WordPress is the URL for that. The entire WordPress code is up on GitHub. But this is never always the latest version. So like it's the betas and all just never come up here. So this is the URL for WordPress 3.8.1 if you want. So let's say I have a plugin up on GitHub. So I ran those bits of code and all that. I have a plugin up on GitHub. So how do I get it in my WordPress? So these are 2 plugins. Okay, so you can use these 2 plugins. You can just download the plugin, put it into your WordPress repository. And whenever you search for plugins from within your WordPress dashboard, you'll get all the plugins listed on GitHub. So these are 2 useful tools for people who are not that familiar with Git and just want to use all the plugins on GitHub. So a quick run through on approaches to using Git with WordPress. For plugin and theme developers, you just run Git inside your plugin or theme folder. You just run those few commands mentioned, and yeah, you're just good to go after that. And yeah, for committing entire WordPress size, for whatever reason you want the entire WordPress code base along with all the plugins, all the themes in your Git repository, you can just run the commands in your WordPress directory. Things to avoid putting in Git, this is where the git ignore files comes in. You just don't put your server details, uploads, cache, and IDE specific files. Now, IDEs like PHP Storm, Dreamweaver like to make their special folders. You just don't put that in Git. It's just a good practice thing and not a lot much.
Jatin, we're really out of time.
Yeah, just give me 2 more minutes. I'm just done. I'm skipping through it. So, approaches to WordPress deployments using Git. So, as we can Git clone on a local machine, we can also do the same on a server. You just use the terminal on your server. You run the git clone command and your theme is right on the server. Again, git pull to pull all the theme changes on your server using Capistrano. So this is something the more advanced users should try out. Has anyone here heard of Capistrano? Okay, do you use it on a regular basis? No, I would definitely recommend that if you, whoa, what is, okay, so if you use GitHub or any sort of Git version control, you should definitely use Capistrano. It'll automate a lot of tasks for you. You won't even have to go to your server anymore. You can just run Capistrano locally and it'll take care of everything. Your entire project will be on the server in a matter of 2 minutes. So Git integration with popular IDEs for all you guys who hate the command line interface. Sublime Text 3 has a couple of super plugins. Even the writers and the content generators can use this. If you ever use Sublime Text, you can just install these plugins into Sublime Text and you can just run Git from within Sublime Text. You don't need to even remember the commands, which is a big plus. And PHP Storm also comes in with built-in support for Git. So if anyone is a big PHP Storm fan, you can do that. Further learning is wpackagist.org is a website that actually uses Composer for handling all your WordPress dependencies. Please check that out. And Bedrock is a WordPress stack that uses GitHub extensively, uses Composer, Capistrano, and Vagrant. So these are some advanced ways of working with WordPress. Please check that out if you have time. And yeah, that's a wrap. So